So I have a situation for you. Imagine you are in a bunker with 39 other women and you don't know why you're there or what is on the outside. These other women have some recollections of a world or a life before the bunker, but their memory is hazy. There is no time in the bunker, and the bunker is monitored and patrolled by these men who don't look at you, who don't speak to you, and that's your life. And that is how the book I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman begins. And I was just so enthralled by this book, and it really inspired a longing for reason and answers. And I don't want to say whether it gives those answers or not. I think you should go into this book like really just knowing the bunker thing. And I think the bunker idea is not an unfamiliar one. There are a lot of stories that are set in a bunker. Recently, I debated watching, have not watched yet, Silo, which is a TV series on Apple TV, which is set in a bunker. And Silo is also based on a book series. The books are Wool, Shift, Dust, and it's by a writer called Hugh Howey. Another bunker story is Fallout, which I have watched, thought it was great. Love a good video game. And also, I suppose something like Room is also kind of a bunker story. The idea of initially the characters being in a small space, and as the reader you're not sure like where they are or what's going on, and then you slowly start to realise the truth or uncover the mystery of what's going on as the story progresses. Now I love that kind of story, and this book is my favourite book like that. And that is for a number of reasons. Which I don't want to say if you haven't read the book. So I'm now going to talk a bit more about the story, but there will be spoilers. So if you haven't read the book, I recommend going to read it. It's only short and it kind of has changed my life. And so I recommend reading it and then coming back and watching the rest of this video. So firstly, I thought I'd just go through what happens in this book. Like the whole the whole story. So we are introduced to our narrator, who is a girl in the bunker, and she doesn't really know how old she is. She doesn't really know about any life before the bunker, and so this is her universe. And life in the bunker is going about its day to day, and then the narrator starts to try and measure time. So she starts to count her heartbeat and work out how many heartbeats in a minute, and through that she manages to kind of try and work out what the time is, and she divulges this little experiment of hers to the other women, and they really appreciate this because they managed to create some sort of structure to their lives. And I think that part really spoke to the desire for meaning, which is a theme that the book looks at a lot, and how time gives our lives meaning. You know, if you just erased the organization of time, erased the days of the week, erased the hours, life suddenly the meaning of life slips further into an abyss if it wasn't there already. And then I was aghast really, because I kind of felt like the story might all be in the bunker, but then the characters get to escape. So a siren goes off and the guards all escape and leave somewhere, and then these 40 women leave the bunker, and they're met with just in a desolate plain. It's barren, and they can't see anything for miles, and they're confused because they're like, is this Earth? And it was just so entertaining to read that bit, because I just so was wanting to work out where they were and what was going on. A big mystery was where the men had gone. It was 11 minutes, I think, from them leaving the bunker to it was 11 minutes from the siren going off to the women leaving the bunker, and the men had disappeared. So the women were like, how did they manage to escape so quickly? And then the women start to track. They start to search for something, and they come across another bunker, and they go in the bunker and find that the people held captive in this bunker never managed to escape. So the women were fortunate enough to escape because one of the guards was when the siren went off, they had the key in the door and the door was partly open. So the women managed to escape. However, in this other bunker that they find, the occupants couldn't escape because the doors were locked. So they all died, presumably starved to death. And this is quite a somber moment for the group, because they realised that they were really fortunate to have not died in the cage, because by luck and by fate the door had been open when the siren went off. And they continue searching, I believe, for 2 years, and they just find more bunkers with more dead occupants. They don't find any sign of the guards, and it becomes, I suppose, a bit just like depressing, because they never find any answers. They just keep coming across more bunkers with dead people inside them. And so they decide to build their own little village and try to form some kind of like community, and they build houses, and they kind of have quite a good life there, it seems, even though they don't know where they are or why they're in the bunker, or whether they're on Earth or another planet. They don't know what's going on, but they try to have some kind of life. And I was really surprised then by how the story and time just kept passing. So the women start to die of old age, and eventually the girl, the narrator, is left on her own. And then the last part of the book, the narrator goes out on her own again to try and find an answer to all of this. And she only really stayed in the village because the other women were there, and you know, she had some kind of companionship with them and didn't want to leave them there. And so yeah, now she has nothing tying her anywhere, and so she goes out to explore on her own, and she comes across a bus, and the people on the bus were all dead, and they all have a book with them about gardening. It just brings out more questions. And the narrator is really excited to find this bus, but she also becomes a bit like depressed because it's just more questions. There are no answers there. And the bus really made me think, well, I'll come on to theories later. Then what happens at the end, the narrator finds a bunker in the ground, and that's where she spends the rest of her days. At the end of the book, she dies in this bunker with none of her questions answered. And that's the book. Okay, so now I'm going to get into some theories, and please let me know if you agree or you have any theories of your own. So my first interpretation of the book is that there is no meaning. that is the point of the book. There is no meaning. And maybe it was an exercise of the authors to write a book that has these clues throughout it and has these like hints at meaning, but actually there is no there's no answer to what is going on. Just like life. Like the main character doesn't know why she's in the bunker, like the other 39 women, and every human on Earth doesn't really know why they're on Earth. Because I do feel that longing for an answer or a purpose or a meaning, like most people do. And I think if you like really sit and think about that, you might end up writing something like this, which is kind of ironic in a way because it doesn't present any answers. I think that's what makes it so beautiful in a way, because you do kind of want to dissect it and try to come up with some answers, even though, are there any? Okay, so my second theory is that this is a post-apocalyptic world, and there are a few clues that point to this being the case. So a lot of the women don't die that old. And so they kind of die from illnesses, because the narrator has to kill a few of them because they're in such pain. And the narrator is the only one who kind of is distant enough from being a human that she feels that she can kill without suffering from the guilt of that. The fact that these women, a lot of them have like illnesses, suggests that they might have illnesses from radiation, from being outside. Another thing that speaks to the post-apocalyptic theory is the bunker that the narrator finds at the end. It very much seems like a bunker someone might go into during like a nuclear fallout, because there's some books in there's food that can last for ages, there's a really nice bed. And also with the bunker that the main character finds at the end, it might be that the guards went into bunkers, which is how they managed to disappear so quickly. Another thing that speaks to this is that there is the bus. And the bus is something very much from our world, and it's like deteriorated, and the people on the bus are dead, which suggests that they died from like a nuclear blast. Also, nothing really grows, and there's just like endless plains, which suggests like everything was obliterated. But what kind of goes against that is like, why isn't there some kind of debris or fallout from this, like if there was a nuclear explosion, why is it just like nothingness? And if this is a post-apocalyptic world, perhaps the bunkers are there because they wanted to breed and like create a new civilization, which is curious though, because like the men and women are separated. There is a point in the book where one of the characters said that they're in the bunker as a result of an administrative blunder, which suggests that perhaps that was initially the plan, but then some things went awry and the person in charge of the operation was no longer there, and so the guards that continued guarding the bunkers continued existing, but their original purpose wasn't able to be fulfilled. So now my third theory, which is that this is another planet. They've been kidnapped by aliens, they're on another planet. Now, I don't really agree with this theory because I'm not so much of a sci-fi person, and also just feel like there's not that much evidence to suggest they're on another planet. Some evidence to suggest they are is the days aren't 24 hours, and there are no real seasons, which could be a result of like a nuclear fallout. But yeah, the weather is different to how it seems on Earth. And there's nothing for miles and miles. Like, why, if this was Earth, why is there just nothing for miles and miles? There's also in the bunker that the narrator is in at the end of the book, there's a book on astronautics, which suggests that maybe there's some like astronomy going on. But for me, there's too much evidence against this theory. So there's a bus. Why is there a bus if there's another planet? Also, if the guards were aliens, say, why do they look like people? And also, why is there just human food in the bunkers? And how did they even, like, why would these aliens have kidnapped these like people and put them in bunkers? Like, I saw a theory online that someone said they were being held hostage in like an intergalactic war, but there's just not it's not enough evidence to suggest that. I think you can totally read that as like what's going on here, but I don't think so. Although I did read a theory that is a little bit more like based on realism, even though it still involves the idea that they've gone to another planet, which is that they weren't kidnapped by aliens, but the humans like purposefully like went to this other planet because maybe Earth is like uninhabitable and so they brought like women and men, put them in separate bunkers so they could breed them, and they bought like gardening books so they could grow vegetation, and they brought a lot of human food so it could last them years and years. But it doesn't really explain the bunkers. Like, why would they build a bunker on this land? If their intention was to make the like surface livable, why would they need to build bunkers? Now, my next theory is something I read online, and that's that this book is like a metaphor for the fallout of war. So the author Jacqueline Hartman was born in 1929, and she is from Belgium, and so she was very much present during the Second World War. Now, an interpretation of this book was that it's like a metaphor for the fallout from the Second World War and like the aftermath of the Holocaust. The idea that the bunker is like the Holocaust, and then the sirens going off is at the end of the war, and then like the characters trying to find some meaning but struggling to. And they tried to find some meaning in that village that they live in, but a lot of them are quite grateful when death eventually comes. I think that's a really interesting interpretation, because going through a traumatic event or experiencing severe grief does really make it harder to find meaning in life. So I totally see how she could have written this as a result of those experiences she had. Now, the final interpretation I have is that this is a metaphor for the patriarchy. So the evidence that supports this theory is that there are bunkers on this planet, and some have women in them, some have men in them, and they're all guarded by kind of blank figures. I believe that all the guards look like men, but they don't ever interact with the prisoners, so they're kind of like these ghost-like figures in a way. And so it's the idea that like everyone is trapped by like the oppression of women throughout the years, not just women but also men, because everyone is affected by that system being in place. And then also like the women eventually escape, which speaks to like women gaining the vote, gaining the right to work, gaining more freedoms within society. But those women then like struggle to like live in the environment that they then enter into, which is kind of similar to like women gaining more freedoms, because although women gain more freedoms, they were then still met with like more subtle sexism. I think that's like a loose interpretation that could be maybe explored more if you really read this book through like a feminist lens. Okay, so those are all my theories. Please let me know if you have any more down below, or which ones you lean more towards. Okay, so just before I go, because I've been talking for a long time, I just want to talk about a few of the things that I think really work in this book. So I think one of the things that really work is the mystery. So you really want to keep on reading because you want to try and work out what is going on. Why are these women in the bunker? Why are all these other bunkers? or on this planet, on Earth, wherever they are. Like, what is going on? That was my main feeling throughout a lot of reading this. What is going on? And I love books like that because you really just want to keep reading to try and find the answers. And I just love how this didn't give me any. Another thing that works really well is the tension. So there's such an unsettling atmosphere throughout the book. At the beginning, you feel like unsettled because these guards are there with whips and they have the capacity to be violent. And then you're unsettled when they leave the bunker because there's just nothing for miles. But like, is there something out there? Like, or are they going to come across a bunker with like people in them and with guards in them? Are they going to be imprisoned again? There's such a high level of tension throughout. And another thing I think really works is the narrator. So I think the fact it was written by the child really just elevates this book because you're seeing it from the perspective of someone who has never experienced Earth. And there's a quote in the book where she says, "I was forced to acknowledge too late, much too late, that I had loved, that I was capable of suffering, and that I was human after all." And I think that's such an impactful quote because throughout a lot of the book, the narrator doesn't really feel like that connected to the 39 other women because she doesn't have the memories of like Earth as it was. But then she realises that she is human after all. And I think I'll just be thinking about this book forever. And I think that's really amazing to be able to write a book that like finds a home in someone's brain and just stays there for the rest of their life. So thank you very much for watching this. I'm going to end this video now because I've been talking a lot, but please do let me know your thoughts on this book. And I will see you in another video soon. Bye bye.